So many years ago, there was a team of researchers, and these researchers wanted to learn about the habits of gorillas. And there was a big group of gorillas living in this particular part of the jungle. And so these researchers decided, let's go study them. Let's go spend some time around these gorillas and watch what they do and how they interact and how they feed and how they mate and how they bring up their young, and let's discover what they're all about. And so they went and gathered all their materials and the computers and machinery and equipment and filming equipment and all kinds of things. And just as a precaution, they decided they would take a few guns. So this group loaded all their equipment, heavy equipment, up into their jeeps and their guns, and they drove off into the jungle. And as they got closer to the gorilla territory, they started unloading all the equipment, and the gorillas, as this team approached them, actually started coming out to them and blocking them off. Some of the more dominant ones would come out, and the males and the bigger gorillas would come and block the team of researchers from entering. They kind of formed a bit of a barrier and gave them the impression that if they came any closer, that heads would be ripped off. And week after week, this research team would come back. It's gone on a spiritual journey. They would come back and they'd try and get into the gorilla territory, but they would always get blocked. Week after week, they'd come back with their equipment and their cameras and everything, but these gorillas wouldn't let them through. And so eventually they almost gave up, and then one of the researchers had this bright idea that no one else was game to do. And of course, you probably know what this researcher did. He left the gun behind. He put aside protection, just in case, and he approached the gorillas. And to his surprise, they let him into their territory. And even more surprising, they welcomed him as one of their community. And this researcher had a more intimate look into the life of gorillas than anyone had ever had. Learn about their ways, their customs, the way they did everything. And a lot of it he never even shared with the outside world because he was so honored to have been accepted by this group of gorillas. And it's a really cool story because for me, so much of my life, looking for authentic relationships, looking for connection, I've come in with my guns. I've come in with my chest plate, my armor. So many of us are looking for that connection, but we're not willing to put down our guns. And I just want to share two things that have really been real keys for me in really being understood by other people, really feeling understood, because that's what we all want. We all want to feel understood. We all want to feel like we're known. On the one hand, it's one of the scariest things we can do, and on the other hand, it's one of the deepest desires, if not the deepest desire of the human heart, is to be known, to be shared, to be in communion. And so these two things, if you can do these, you will experience deeper intimacy and connection with everyone, with any person, deeper than you've ever had. And the two things are, of course, number one, vulnerability. And this is the scary thing for so many people because we are conditioned to believe that people, strangers, other people are going to hurt us. Well, the reality is no one else can actually hurt you. That's such a big shock for so many people to hear. But the reality is no one can hurt you because you control the meaning. It's the only thing you control. You don't control your circumstances. You don't control what's happening around you. You can't control other people. You can't even control your own mind half the time, which is scary for a lot of people. You can't. Literally try to control your mind. This is what a lot of Zen teachers do to their students. And it's a game because, you go away and you do hundreds of hours of meditation only to discover that it is impossible to have total control over your mind. All you can do is observe it. And that's what that's all about. It's teaching you that you have very little control over anything. One of the only things you can control is how you interpret, how you give meaning to things. And so if you're going to be truly vulnerable, you have to start with telling the truth, which is that no one can hurt you. No one can hurt you. Only you decide what hurts you. Only you decide how to interpret what other people say. So that's number one, is by accepting the reality that no one can hurt you, it gives you freedom to be vulnerable. You can't be harmed. Your spirit, the spirit that dwells within you, can't be harmed. It's the ego that gets harmed. It's the ego that gets wounded, but hurt, and puts up a fight, gets angry, gets reactive. Not the real you. The real you can't be hurt. And once you accept that that's the real you, the spirit having a human journey, you're safe to be vulnerable. That's number one. And number two, if you really want to be understood by the people, and I'm not even going to talk about the cliche, seek to understand to be understood. Seek first to understand, then to be understood. I think most people kind of get that. I think the thing that people struggle with, definitely that I struggle with a lot in the past, and I'm getting a lot better at this, is being present. Being present. If you want to be understood by other people, if you want to understand other people, you've got to be present. And being present is just that's being present. It's not something you can put on, it's not something you can act, it's just a being, a doing. Yeah, I'm thinking about doing podcasts. Thank you, Spiritual Journey. So that's number two. If you can just practice being present with people, firstly being completely vulnerable, and then secondly being completely present, you will be blown away at what opens up. The level of intimacy that you can experience, the level of satisfaction that you can get from relationships, not just with other people, but with yourself. The level of connection that you'll start to experience with yourself by practicing those two things. Even being vulnerable with yourself, that starts with telling the truth to yourself, giving up the lies that you tell yourself. I've been reading a book called The Science of Self-Deception. That's a really interesting book. Just learning about all the different ways that we lie to ourselves. We think we're protecting ourselves, but actually we're hurting ourselves every time we tell ourselves a lie. And the ego's so sneaky in how deep these lies go and how it covers its own tracks. Unless you're really giving presence to this whole thing, half the time you don't even know that you're lying to yourself. So it's an interesting thing to start practicing. So I just wanted to leave you with those two things. To have other people understand you, to really connect, because that's what life's about. Connecting with self, connecting with others, connecting with everything. Got to practice those two things, vulnerability and presence. So I hope you enjoyed that video, and please leave me your comments, questions below. I love reading those. Share this with someone, and look forward to seeing you on another video. Peace.